All right, I hope you can see my screen. Joanna, is it clear?
Yes, perfect. We can see it.
All righty, perfect. So thank you everyone again for joining us today. I'm really excited about this webinar. All right, so a little bit about me. I'm an analytics consultant based in Dubai, leading a team of marketeers at TechGnosis Media, which I just launched a couple months ago. And at TechGnosis Media, we're basically a tech-based digital marketing agency. So almost you could think of us as a 360 digital marketing agency. We cover everything in the technology and marketing sphere, and in general, just a tech and marketing enthusiast. All right, I'm going to dive straight into what's going to be happening today in the webinar. So we're going to be discussing the basics of web analytics, why it's important, and how is data collected, how is it used, why is it important to collect it, how can we track it, and all of that stuff. So I'm going to start, before diving into the nitty-gritties, let's examine why are we even talking about a subject such as web analytics. You know, we're all gathered here with our curiosities in our mind about why it's so important. So let's look at some stats to get an idea of, you know, how big the industry is. So from CIO, we get to know that 80 to 90% of the data we generate today is unstructured. What does that mean? Well, basically that means consumers want to have the same sublime experience when dealing with a brand, regardless of the device they're using. They want the same experience. So think of it, you know, Facebook, for example. You log into Facebook via your mobile phone, via your laptop, your tablet. You want to have the same experience, right? The same quality experience. You want the same journey. You want to be very confident using the platform. You know how to post a picture. You know how to, you know, post a thought. It just feels very intuitive, right? So what this means basically is that a user can contact a company through social media using a PC, surf the company website on mobile, make a purchase using a tablet, contact your customer service, you know, via email. And as such, all data we generate is from the same person, but it comes from different forms, right? Me coming in via my laptop and making a purchase generates different data than me going into your email and sending you an email. That's a bit different. Me just reading content is different. So we have more data than ever before, exactly because of this reason. Because there's so many channels, there's so many devices, and there's so many, you know, ways of interacting with companies online. Let's look at another stat about Google. So Internet Live shows us that Google gets over 3.5 billion searches with a B daily. And also Google remains the highest shareholder of search engine. So in the search engine market, Google is the highest shareholder with over 87% of the global search engine market as of 2020. So this might have changed since we're in 2021. And big data stats for 2020 also show that this translates into 1.2 trillion searches yearly and more than 40,000 queries per second. And that's not it. 5% of all new Google searches have never been typed before. So, I mean, think about that. 5% of the 1.2 trillion is absolutely new, meaning the intent is new, meaning people are searching for different things. People are using different combinations of words. So we're generating unique data in seconds, you know, every day within seconds. So that's really the state of, you know, data analytics. Let's look at Facebook. So in 2019, there were 2.3 billion active users on Facebook, and they generated a lot of data. Stats from 2012 showed that they were sharing almost 700,000 pieces of content every minute. And in 2014, that number increased nearly 4 times, resulting in 2.1 47 million pieces of content per minute. And from 2015, data from Domo showed us that in just 60 seconds, Facebook users liked 4.1 million posts. So you get the idea. There's a lot happening on the internet. And you can think of the internet as this sort of parallel digital universe that we're living in today. And this is all the data that we are generating. And this is just a glimpse of the state of data analytics in today's world. And these stats are from years ago. So you can imagine, in 2020, how these stats have quadrupled in numbers. All right, so now we can talk about what is web analytics. Well, in a simple theoretical definition, web analytics is the collection, the measurement, analysis, and reporting of web data for the purpose of understanding and optimizing web usage. Now, there is an emphasis on collection, measurement, and reporting of data, and that is what we're going to be discovering in a lot more depth throughout the webinar. Now, I'm pretty sure almost all of you have done either one of these things, made a purchase online, maybe you got that t-shirt you wanted, maybe you signed up for New York Times newsletter, maybe you watched cute cat videos on YouTube, participated in one of those crazy, quizzes that BuzzFeed gives you, like what type of cookie you are, basically anything, any intent that you have for taking any type of action on the internet translates into data. So as an outcome of your online activity, chances are you have generated data, and that data has been measured and it has been tracked by the business or the website you were visiting. So hence why we have more data than ever before, because everything you do on the web is being tracked. Now, I don't want to sound spooky over here because that data is not personally identifiable, but in aggregate, that's a lot. Now, you may ask, how do we measure that data? Well, there are many tools, hundreds of tools on the market, but the most popular ones, let's say, is Google Analytics, Adobe. There's, Web Trends and Piwik. We're going to specifically be talking about Google Analytics, mainly because it's one of the most used and one of the tools that, with its free version, will give you a lot of insight apart from the paid one. Like, you wouldn't even have to, if you're, let's say, a small e-commerce store owner, you would go for Google Analytics. Adobe is a competitor of Google, but Adobe only does enterprise software. So that's probably not, the most accessible to the general public. And then we have Web Trends and Piwik and all these small data tools. But in terms of comprehensibility, Google is the best one when it comes to the free version. All right. So you may ask, how does Google collect data? Like, how does Google know so much about us and what we do and where do we click and where do we go on the website? Well, in a technical idea, Google collects data using cookies. And I'm not talking about the very amazing, unhealthy, sweet biscuits. These are technical cookies. So after a user visits a page and the web page code loads, the JavaScript code for Google triggers and creates a cookie that is stored on the user's computer. Now, you may have a lot of times deleted your cookies or cleared your browser history, and then it deletes cookies immediately. So it's exactly that. It's the piece of code that is on your browser or on your device, and via that, Google basically processes and presents data in its software, in GA, in the reports. So this is literally how the whole journey looks like. So there's a request made, and then the page is rendered or served, and then the JavaScript is executed the cookie is dropped, the data is sent to Google, the data is processed, and then the reports are available. Now, what does that look like in real life? Well, I will go and visit a page, and without me knowing, of course, at the back end, a cookie is triggered, and then the data is sent and processed. And meanwhile, I'm so unaware, just looking at cat videos. So you might want to know what a cookie is in depth. Well, a cookie is a piece of data sent from a website, and it's stored in a user's computer by the browser, containing information on the user and the visit. So a cookie will take information such as, the URL you were visiting or where you're visiting from. It would take information from your IP address, but it's not going to be personally identifiable, because that is you cannot by the laws of Google Analytics, you cannot track any PII information. So in aggregate, cookies are pieces of data collected by websites with information on the session, as well as all the interactions as part of that session. So let's say interactions on the user, and it also links multiple sessions. So for example, if I visit a website on my laptop, and then I visit that same website on my mobile phone, it's the cookies that will link my sessions together. And there are also two types of cookies, which I don't want to go into too much detail, because this webinar would be a lot longer. But this is an important note. There are two types of cookies. There are the temporary cookies, which expire after each session and provide detail on session basis. And persistent cookies are the ones which remain on the hard drive until erased and link multiple sessions to one user. And so you can divide cookies as browser-based and device-based. We can come back to this if you guys have questions. All right, so this is how it works. Let's say I go into Qureos, the page is loaded, the cookie is fired, and the data, which is about my session on the website, is sent to Google. It's quite that simple. All right, so how do you get that code? Well, every time you make an account with Google Analytics to track your website, so let's say you want to start selling T-shirts online, and you want to get to know basic things about your user or your business in general. When you make an account, Google gives you a code that you paste on the header of your website. And basically, that is what collects data using cookies through code implemented on the website. So it's the tracking code that triggers the cookies on the website. And then when the page loads and the cookie fires, the information on the session, which is the temporary cookie, and the persistent cookie, that information is sent back to Google servers to get it processed by the relevant account. So if a user has visited the site before and a persistent cookie is already in place, so the cookie that stays on the hard drive, it will recognize the user as a returning visitor. And a returning visitor is also a metric in GA. And we're going to be discussing metrics and dimensions in a little bit more detail. All right, so tracking. How do we track and how do we install this code to get the information that we want? So there are two main ways to install the GA code. The first is to install the code directly into the website using GA's developer guidelines. This is usually done by a developer, but if you're a person who's starting an e-commerce business, you might not be a developer and you just might be someone who wants to sell online. The other method, which is also recommended by Google, is you could implement the code using a tool called Google Tag Manager, which is a product in the Google suite. And if the Tag Manager code is already set up on the website, the easy thing about this is that you don't necessarily need a developer to make changes. So think of Google Tag Manager as a place where you can easily tweak things you want to track about your users without knowing the codey stuff. Of course, you'll have to know the basics, but it's not as complicated as getting into the back end of your website and then making all the tracking changes. And actually, Tag Manager is the recommended method by Google to implement the code on your website. So this is usually, how the implementation is done. The great thing about Tag Manager is that it's free. It's a free tool, and it allows marketeers to add and update tags. Again, marketeers, we're not necessarily developers, but we understand the basics of the technical elements. And it's also, again, the recommended method by Google. All right, so after you have, let's say you've added this code on your website via Google Tag Manager. Whoops. All right, I'm sorry, I just had a bit of a nudge there. Okay. So what type of data does this code collect? Thing that this code will get, it will give you basic information, such as page information, browser, and user. So it will send back, this is the basic data that Google will send back to get aggregated in the reports. So URL is the first. So what URL of the page the user is viewing, the title of the page, let's say browser. So what browser are you using? Are you coming from Chrome, or are you coming from Safari? Viewport and viewing panel. So the size of the browser window is very important. This is a very important metric. Screen resolution, and the user information is location. So this is derived from the IP address where the hit originated. The IP address itself is not available in GA. As I said, PII, which violates the terms of Google, and the language. So this is all that GA will get to know about you. But a basic page view tag, this is all it will tell you. So this is without doing any custom configuration inside of Google. Just by this tag, you can get to know where they're coming from, what language does your user speak, what type of browser you're using. And this is enough to make good decisions into sort of how you can optimize your website. But again, we're going to get into individual reports coming on. So let's get into reporting. Alrighty. So almost every online business needs to know and answer 4 basic questions. Who is my audience? Where do my audience come from? Right, what do they do? And how do they buy? So let's take an example of a sneaker store, right? Let's say you're a manager at the sneaker store. In real life, you can answer all of these questions quite easily. If I were to have a conversation with you and I asked, who is your audience? And you could say, oh, we've got more males coming in than females. They're more Asians. Some of them come and, they'll buy 4 pairs of sneakers and leave within 10 minutes. Some of them will come, stay for 5 hours, try 10 different pairs of sneakers, and they'll leave without buying. It's very easy to answer these questions when you're, in a physical store. But when this whole situation moves online, you don't really know who's coming to your website. You don't really know who they are. You don't even know how they got there and what are they doing, right? What's the goal? Like, what's their intent of being on the website? So that's one of the reasons web analytics is incredibly important. And that all these questions, the answers come in the form of data. And that's what the goal of Google Analytics is, to provide you the answers to all these questions. All right. So on the left side, this is what the Google Analytics reporting section looks like. And there are 4 main reporting areas. There is audience, acquisition, behavior, and conversion. And again, audience is about, who are my audience? Acquisition is how do you acquire them? So how are they getting to your website? And then behavior is what are they doing on site? And conversion is what do you want them to do? Which we'll get we'll get into each of these reports in depth now. All right, so these 4 reports will help you get a full picture of what the users are doing. So this includes the user journey they take from landing page to exit page. So a landing page is the page you enter, and the exit page, as it says, is the page that you exit from. How are they engaging with the content, and what actions do they take on the website? So it's a full user journey. So from, engage user journey, the start to engagement to action, basically. These 4 parts will give you a full picture. All right, so you've gathered all this data in GA. What are the insights you can take? Because at the end of the day, the idea of having this data neatly organized is not just to report, but it's to make informed decisions about optimizing your website, and also provide understanding of how successful your campaigns are. So if you're running Google Ads, for example, how successful they are, or if you've done a lot of efforts into search engine optimization, how is that going? So reporting, at the end of the day, the idea is to act upon the data that you have collected. So the areas to look at for specifically optimizing your website can include identifying and removing blocks and conversion paths by looking at drop-off rates at different stages of the journey. So Google Analytics, if you have an e-commerce store, will give you a full-on funnel to identify, and you can actually configure that funnel and add steps that a user will take to make a purchase on your website. So you can look at that and see, for example, a lot of the times in e-commerce websites, people will add a lot of stuff in their carts, and then at the checkout page, they'll see $20 shipping fee, and they'll just abandon their cart because it's too much. They can't, justify it. So by looking at the data, understanding what is the stage at which my users drop, it's very easy to then fix that. Understanding and improving poor content by looking at what content your audience is looking for and engaging with the most. That is another. So if you're a publisher, let's say, you manage New York Times, GA will give you a full-on view of what are the page URLs that your visitors are most consuming, right? So that can be a very interesting insight. So let's say, for example, if you've got segments of topics, you can understand that in March, I've got more people reading political news versus in February, people reading, technology news. This can be important for you to produce content in the future. And then on a campaign level, it will tell you information about, where your traffic is coming from, the quality of the traffic, do they bounce off the site very fast? So this was reporting areas, sort of how you can optimize for website and campaign success. And now we're going to dive deep into each area of the reports. All right. Actually, this is one of my favorite reports in GA because I get to know a lot about the people, and sometimes it's very fascinating how people can find you on the internet. As I said, the best way to really understand analytics is to compare it with real life. With real life, it's very easy to know that this person referred you to this, and so you got a sale, or so you got a client. But when it's online, it's a lot more complex because there are incredible amounts of channels and browsers and devices and people. So it's very interesting to see, who are the people who come and actually make a purchase on your website. So audience reports provide insights into users of the website. So including the basic number of sessions, users, whether they are new or returning. We just spoke about this in how the cookie configurates them into 2 buckets. So is the user returning or is it a new user? Where they're geographically located, their age range, their gender, and information on what device or technology they're using when visiting your website. This information is contained within different reporting areas in the section, which you can see over here. There's demographics, there's interest, geo, behavior, technology, mobile, there's cross-device, benchmarking, users flow, which we will not go into because these are a bit more advanced concepts of GA, but this is an overview of what GA will provide you. All right, acquisition is just as interesting, actually. Acquisition reports provide insights on how users are coming to your website. So what sources, campaigns, or channels are driving the most traffic? The main areas to look at is within the all traffic section. And this provides you details on source by channel using tree maps, most popular sources, referral reports, referral information from traffic, which I will show you in the next slide right over here. So in the all channels report, you can see that over here, direct. So I will just quickly give you a little bit of a definition of what all these terms mean. Direct is when someone directly types in your URL. So, if I already know where I want to go, I'll just type, Qureos.com or TechGnosisMedia.com. And then there's display, which is the Google's ad network. If I see your banner on a website, I might click on it, and that would land me to your website. Affiliate is when I'm doing affiliate marketing. So let's say, for example, again, I'm a t-shirt business, right? And I want influencers to market my t-shirt, and so I can get conversions, and I can make money. So how I would track that is by affiliate links. So let's say I have 3 different influencers that I'm using. I would give one of them, I can give them different links that will let me know which one is performing the best, and that will be bucketed as affiliates. There's paid search, which is Google Ads, so how many people I'm getting from there. Organic is when I organically type, let's say, internship platforms in Dubai, and then I'll see Qureos link pop up. That is defined as an organic channel. And then there's referral. So again, referral is a link, let's say I found on someone's website, and then that landed me onto your website. So this is the default grouping. You can change this based on how complex your business is, but these are sort of the main channels that Google gives you information by. All right, now we've got the behavior reports, okay. So behavior reports provide you insights on what your visitors are doing on your website. Specifically, the reports will tell you what pages people visit, what actions they take while visiting. The behavior overview report provides you information on page views, average time on page, bounce rate, exit rate. So these are some of the metrics that Google will educate you on, which we will go into depth a bit later on. These type of detailed reports can, let you know what is working on your site and what's not. So what is interesting your users, what's not, by seeing what they're interacting with the most. All right. So in behavior, there are a couple of things that Google will track, by default, right? So let's say, for example, there's, it already tells you about bounce rate on specific pages, exit rate on specific pages, right? But let's say you want to know more about your visitors. Let's say you added a form on your website, right? You added a PDF link and you want to know how many people downloaded that. Well, for that, what we have to do is generate custom codes to capture that information. So, and that is called event tracking. Event tracking allows you to track additional elements and interactions on your website apart from activity, which loads the page. So this can include a video. So for example, if you have a video on your website, you might want to know how many people watched it through, how many people clicked pause, for example, or how many people didn't even, click the hit button and start watching it. So The only thing about event tracking is that it requires additional customization of your code, but it definitely is very important if you're, let's say, for example, if I'm a bank, right, and I've got a PDF for people to fill in, so I can have my sales team get in touch with them and sell them the debit or credit card or whatever. It's very important for me because that then becomes my ideal goal, right? My ideal goal is to track how many people actually downloaded the PDF or clicked on it. Similarly, form interaction. So if you're a lead generation website, you want to know how many people are interacting with your form and they're adding their information, and then that's coming to you. So this is apart from the CRM that you will have, the customer database that you have. This will be apart from that, just to see, are people dropping off somewhere? Again, with events, you can understand if people are clicking on some things or if they're not. And similarly, social buttons. I mean, every website you visit on, you scroll down, and there are social buttons at the bottom that says, there's an icon of Facebook, of Instagram, of Twitter or whatever. If you want to know how much traffic your website is bringing to your social channels, you might want to track those buttons specifically. And another example of behavior I can give you, which was very fascinating to me when I was entering the world of analytics, is scroll tracking. You wouldn't even think of this. You go on New York Times, for example, and you're reading an article and you keep scrolling, and that article is, 2,000 pages. You feel like you're just reading the article. And I mean, what can they track, right? But what they are tracking is scroll. And there are certain percentages. So for example, if the article is, an X amount length, they will have events. So certain code that triggers every time you scroll 25% of that whole page length. Or let's say you scrolled 50% of that whole page length. There are events which keep triggering, and that data is then sent to Google. So you could literally see if a news brief on Donald Trump got, people read the most, or, if, for example, another type of content topic, people land on it, people read the first paragraph and they leave. How would you know that? You would know that via scroll tracking events. So events are incredibly important, and they are gathered in behavior reports. All right, conversion reports. These provide you insight on basically everything that has a monetary value for your business, right? So if I'm an e-commerce store, monetary value for me is people buying a t-shirt, or people buying a sneaker, or people buying a cookie, right? If I sell a tangible product, that is a conversion for me. If I'm more of like a lead generation platform, so let's say if I'm Qureos, my concern is how many people or how many apprentices are coming on my website and submitting their information and becoming a part of the portal. So based on how you define your business goals, all of the conversions are in the conversion report. And this will give you a lot of very insightful and sort of very depthful data as well. But the basic ones are just queries, submissions. There's assisted conversions and multi-channel funnels, which we're not going to be going into because it's a world of its own. But in the basic term, it will provide you all the, so this is where you want to see, are users doing what you want them to do, right? So you can go into these reports, which we will at the end of the webinar. I'd walk you through inside of GA, just so you can get yourself a little familiar with the interface of the software. All right, again, this is type of conversion. So, in the GA reports, this is what you can track. So if you're an e-commerce website, sales is very important. Another thing that's important for you is cart abandonment. How many people add their product into the cart, but they leave without checking out? How many accounts people create on your e-commerce website? So accounts created is almost a measure of, let's say, interest, right? People are interested, they've created an account, and maybe they'll come back when they have enough time or enough budget to buy the thing that they want to buy. And for B2B websites, this means leads or white paper downloads, right? You could be a SaaS product. And you might want to, a method of your lead generation is giving people free value, free content. So you might want to see how many people are downloading your white paper. And similarly, for a B2C website, it could be, trial sign up. So let's say Qureos, right? They want to see how many people have signed up to their portal, how many people have viewed videos, and also accounts created is the same type of conversion for them. Alrighty, so now we get into the meat and potatoes of analytics, which is metrics and dimension. And we're gonna quickly go through the definition just to get the theory sort of right. So what is a dimension? In the simplest form, a dimension is an attribute of your data. So you can think of them as categories that your users fall into. And a metric is quantitative, always quantitative measurement. And it tells you the number of people within each dimension. I hope we can get into this later on at the Q&A if you've got any more questions. So let's look at dimensions, right? So dimensions are characteristics of the visitors on your website. They tell you information about your customer's age, gender, plus what device they're using. And metrics are helpful for analyzing your data, but they're obsolete without dimensions to compare your data again. So, think of it like, what good is sessions if you don't know which country they're coming from, right? What good is knowing how much traffic you're getting if you don't know if they're male or female? So if we look over here, for example, if a 25-year-old man in Germany accesses your site from Facebook ad on his smartphone, the dimension attribute for him would be, okay, he's a male, he's between 25 to 35, his location is Germany, and his source and medium is, so source is basically the channel, and the medium is how you're getting there. So the medium in this case is a Facebook ad on the source platform, which is Facebook. And the device category, okay, he came from mobile. And, for a metric, let's say how we would compare it against a dimension would be, let's say I want to know how many sessions I'm getting from Germany in aggregate. That then it becomes more important, right? Because I have a context. So you can think of dimensions as contextual metrics, right? So if I want to know average time on page, perhaps maybe on mobile, if I'm a publisher, I get more average time on page because a lot of people, are reading in the morning when they're taking the metro to work, or, maybe they're walking, or, we anyway use a lot more of our phone than our laptop. So again, a dimension is a more contextual form of a metric, and metrics wouldn't really make a lot of sense if we wouldn't have dimension. All right, and now we're gonna go into the most basic metrics that you should know, and this is regardless of you using GA or not using GA, or using any analytics platform in general. These are some of the metrics and dimensions you should have an idea of. So the first one is bounce rate, and it's one of the most important because it lets you know the amount of people came and left without doing anything. And the reason why bounce rate is incredibly important in so many organizations, and it's a metric that is given a lot of attention to, is because it's the number one thing that can tell you if something's messed up with your website or not. So in definition, it shows you percentage of your visitors that triggered only one request from Google Analytics server. So, a lot of the times you click on a website and then you wait 2 to 3 to 4 seconds and it doesn't load, and then you just leave. Well, that is a bounce, right? You did send a request to the server. It's just that the page didn't render, right? So if you have a website that is very heavy and it's not optimized for mobile, and you have very heavy images on your website, chances are it's gonna load very slowly, and that's gonna cause a high bounce rate. And so, yeah, I mean, basically, if you don't, I just lost my train of thought over here because I was thinking if I should explain more on bounce rate because it's so important. So bounce rate is basically calculated as you came and you did nothing and you left. So you could ask me, okay, if I go on a website and if I scroll and then I leave, is that a bounce or no? Well, in this case, it depends on how the website is tracking. So if the website has event tracking on it and your scroll is counted, then it's not a bounce. But let's say if it's not counted, then you basically just gave one page view hit. You're counted as a bounce then. How it's counted, like the mathematics behind it, is basically it's simply the number of single page sessions divided by the total number of sessions. So simple math here. How many, the number of single page sessions divided by the total of sessions. And ideally, a healthy bounce rate is between 30 to 40. And this also depends a lot on the type of website you have, right? If you have an e-commerce website, you will see that your sessions are longer. So ideally, the bounce rate should not be a lot. Similarly, if you're a publisher, the bounce rate should not be a lot. But let's say if you're a law firm and you're running a paid search, right? And I find you via typing best law firms in Dubai, and I land on your website and it doesn't load and I just leave, well, there isn't much intent there apart from just information. So there's a high chance that my bounce rate is going to be a lot. All right, we're getting into session. What is a session? So GA records a session every single time someone visits your website. And the unique thing about sessions is that it starts right away when someone loads a page and it ends after 30 minutes of inactivity. Every page view, click, transaction is tracked during this activity that makes up one session. If that same visitor, so let's say I visit your website and then I come back several hours later or next day, a new session will be counted. Therefore, when you go into GA, you will always see that users, so your metric for users, so how many users you're getting on your website is, and versus sessions, your sessions are always going to be higher. Because think of it, one person can have many sessions, right? Average session duration. This is very important. Again, not in GA, but as a common metric. As a marketeer or someone who's interested in digital or tech, these are some of the basic metrics that will really help you further on. So average session duration in GA tells you how long on average visitors are staying on your site. And how it's calculated, very simple math, it's the total duration of sessions in seconds divided by the total number of sessions. So that is how you get the average of session duration. Again, this is very impactful on how you run your business, so how you structure your website, and also what your business is about. So you will see a lot of publisher websites have very high average session duration, because the intent of me coming to Wired or TechCrunch or New York Times or CNN is because I want to stay time over there educating myself on the news, right? So my session duration is going to be a lot longer. Pages per session. So as the name describes, is pages per session is the average number of pages a person views in a given time. And in GA, pages per session is calculated by dividing the total number of page views by the total number of session. Again, it's very simple math. But why is pages per session important? Well, it is incredibly important to understand how much people are engaged with my website, right? So if my my pages per session are, let's say, in average 2, well, that just means people aren't doing much, right? Ideally, again, content-driven websites will have more pages per session. Even e-commerce will have a lot pages per session, because I'm looking, product after product. If I want to buy a black dress, I will probably, on an e-commerce site, go through a lot of pages, a lot of categories. So that is a healthy metric if it's high. And page view, as the name suggests, is the view of any page that is tracked by GA. And what we discussed in our previous slides of the basic data that GA gives you is based on that page view hit. And quite honestly, it's a generous measurement, because if I land on a page, that's a page view. If I reload the page, that's a page view again. And if I leave the page and come right back, it's a page view again. So all from the same user, but lots of page views. And again, this is an inflated metric, as we call it, because one user could give you 50 page views, for example. All right, now we're getting into the A/B testing part. All right, so we're going to be talking about what is A/B testing and why is it important in terms of web analytics. You know, you might think A/B testing is a lot different than what we've been discussing the last 30 minutes. Well, it's important and it's very relevant to analytics, and we'll discuss why. In definition, A/B testing is also known as split testing. It's a process of showing two variants of the same web page to different segments of website visitors at the same time, and then comparing which variant drives more conversion. In a simple, like if I were to simplify this, think of it, if you run a bakery and you are selling cookies, you create two types of cookies. One is, one is red velvet, and let's say one is chocolate chip, and you put it out on the top counter, and you want to see what is attracting my visitors the most. In the case of analytics, A/B testing is a lot more conversion driven. So the reason why you would do it is either to improve something on your website or to improve the conversions that you're making. So meaning people buying more stuff, people reading more content and stuff like that. Now, why is it important? This is what I was talking about. Improved user engagement. So for example, you could A/B test different page headlines. So I'll take the example of New York Times again. New York Times could test news headline of the same news twice. So for example, they've got a news about, I don't know, Trump, right? And they've got two versions of headline, and they want to see which one is getting the most clicks. They can do that via A/B testing. So what they're doing basically is they're showing the same thing, but with two different variants. And what you can test with A/B testing is a lot. A/B testing is not only specific to web, but you can also A/B test in email. So if you're a person who's building a community, you were talking about, I don't know, cryptocurrency, and you've started a newsletter, and you're getting very less open rates. What you can do is you can A/B test your email subject and see which one gets the most opens. So you could test the open rate. So you can test anything from a web page, app, an ad, emails. You can also test the subject line. You could also test the imagery and call to action, language, fonts, colors, you name it. There's a lot of freedom when it comes to A/B testing, thanks to the tools we have today. Increased conversion rates is another one why A/B testing is very important. It's the simplest, most effective means to determine the best content and convert visits into signups and then purchases. Knowing what works and what doesn't is really going to help your business, and you can do that via A/B testing. And in terms of, in the context of e-commerce, getting a user to follow through with checkout after clicking buy on an item is a challenge. People who run e-commerce websites will know this. Most potential customers will abandon their cart before paying. A/B testing can really help you find the optimal combination of tweaks to the order pages, to what kind of language you're using, to what the path looks like, and then actually examining what could cause them to fail and abandon their cart, and then test exactly that thing, which we will talk about a framework for A/B testing in the next slide. But before we go there, we're going to talk about some tools that you can use for A/B testing. There are tons of tools out there. I mean, more than I can fit into the slide. But Google Analytics and Google Optimize offer one of the best data collecting and A/B testing solutions. And the great thing is that it's free. A lot of these other tools are not free at all. You have to buy a member subscription, which is usually on a monthly basis. HubSpot, which you might know as a CRM platform, also has a great email A/B testing tool. The other one is Optimizely, which is an industry leader in conversion rate optimization. And there's also Convertize. But again, depending on if you were to choose a tool for A/B testing, it would be more based on your needs as a business. So now we're going to go through an example of how A/B testing is done, why it's important, and how it looks like in the real world. Humana is a site based in the US. It's an insurance site. And they had been using a banner that displayed a lot of copy, a weak CTA, and no clear and concise message. As you can see over here, that's a lot of copy. I don't really know what am I supposed to do here. It's a bit all over the place, right? And the most important thing about specifically banners is that many landing pages showcase large banners at the top of the page. And that's really valuable, like digital real estate. So if the banner isn't optimal, it could end up doing more harm than good. So it's very important to frequently test what's good and what's not. So what they did was, well, for variation B, which is what they tested, they decided to simplify the message. The variation ended up receiving 433% more click-through rates than control. So over here, they had treatment before, they have control now, and they have a little bit of a clear CTA. They've got less copy, right? You kind of understand what you're trying to achieve on their website. But they actually didn't stop there. They did a variation C, where the call to action, so over here, it's get started now. In the next one, they decided to switch to a language that was a bit of a harder sell. So over here, they said shop instead of get started now. And with variation C, Humana switched the CTA language again to a harder sell. The change in language, just the language, resulted in 192% increase in click-through. So you kind of get the idea of, why A/B testing is so important and why you should consider it as someone who runs any type of, website. Because quite honestly, when you're running a website, you don't really know the problem of the person who's sitting on the other side of the screen, whether that be a laptop or a mobile phone. So it's the data that can really let you know, okay, this is what's happening. And then based on the data, you can A/B test via all these tools and get to know insights. Now, there are some rules of A/B testing, which are very important. The first is run the test for at least 7 days. And this is for people who, for websites that get consistent traffic. Again, I'm not saying you have to test it for minimum 7 days. This should be based on every business, because your website traffic could be very different on Saturday than it was on Monday, right? So you have to let it run at least for a long enough time so that when the data comes in, you're not making a biased decision, right? So you should have enough data points to base your decision on. And 7 days is actually quite a small time. So you should really, the best way to determine this is look at your traffic, monthly traffic in GA, and then decide how long you're going to let the test run for. But this is very important. A lot of people will, especially a lot of beginners, they'll run tests and then they wouldn't have long enough period. And it's not even about long enough period. A lot of the times you could let it sit for 2 weeks, but it's, if you only get the most significant traffic on Wednesdays or Thursdays for some reason, it could be any, what you've got the data upon is basically 2 Wednesdays and 2 Mondays. Do you know what I mean? So the timing is incredibly important. Always start with a hypothesis. This is, again, one of the most important. The reason why you have to always start every test with a hypothesis is so that you can understand what you're trying to prove or refute. So how does a typical hypothesis in A/B testing would look like? Well, a short sentence that summarizes what you're trying to prove, and it should include a tested variable and the success metric which determines. So I'll throw out now. I will say that I believe XYZ e-commerce store can get 5% more add to carts if they change the color of the buy now button to red from green. Right? So I have a short sentence explaining, am I proving something or refuting it? It includes a tested variable. In my case, that is the color of the buy now button, and a metric. So I believe it's going to be a 5% increase. The reason a hypothesis is important so that you can, you can back it by the data you found out, right? So if you didn't know what you were testing for in the first place, you wouldn't be able to make sense of the data. And test one variable at a time. That is one of the most important out of all of these. Never test two things at once. Because by nature, A/B testing, when we're doing A/B testing, we're testing one thing, meaning everything else should be the same. So let's say if you were testing a subject line on an email for better open rates, all other variables should be the same. The copy, the design, the time of sending. Because, for example, if you said, I'm going to change the subject line, but I'm also, instead of sending them on Sunday 2 p.m., I'm going to send them at Monday 4 p.m. Well, if you do get increase in clicks, in open rates, you don't really know if Monday at 4 p.m. gave you those clicks or was it the subject line. So testing one variable at a time is incredibly important. Alrighty, well, that marks the end of it. These are some additional resources. Google has a merchandise store, which is called Google merchandise at google.com, I think it is. And it's a demo store. You can also buy products off of it, but it's also a store where there's a GA account with it. So for example, if you don't want to build a website from scratch and add products to it and then drive traffic to it to get data, you can sign up for the demo account. You can play around with the data. You can make custom reports in it, understand things better, and familiarize. Now, one thing that I feel like is very important mentioning over here is that a lot of people starting in web analytics, people who have interest, what they do is they really dive a lot into just the interface in GA, which is important. But I would say before you take on any project in the future about web analytics, or even when you're learning, instead of deep diving into the metrics and how they're calculated and what they mean, go on the website for the website that you're collecting the data for. Go on it, actually make a purchase, read some articles, right? Click on different objects on the website, and put yourself in the user of in the shoes of the user. And then when you go back to the interface, you will really understand what the data reflects because you've been through the journey. Then it would make sense to you, why you didn't pay for that t-shirt, or why you didn't read that whole article. So it's very important. There's a link to creating the GA account. There are some amazing YouTube channels for GA education. Some of them are listed over here. And if you want to get more educated and if you've got more interest, the best way to learn and get certified is with the GA Academy. So I would highly recommend going in there and taking the GA for Beginners course. They've also got courses on Google Tag Manager. So if you have more of a developer background, you might want to check that out. But this is really the best way to educate yourself, get platform native education. All right, Joanna, should we open up for questions?
Right. Yeah. So we are running out of time, actually. Sorry, guys, but we also want to answer your questions. So if any of you have questions, you want to unmute and ask them, that's absolutely fine. If you are feeling a little shy and you want to put it in the chat, that's also okay. but go ahead and let's just get started. So Warda has a question. She asks, is KPI and ROI part of marketing analytics? What should be the benchmark for these?
Okay. Yes, they are part of marketing analytics. So let's talk about what is a KPI. So KPI is a key performance indicator, and an ROI is return on investment, right? So a KPI, for example, yes, these are part of marketing analytics, but I would say on a top level, these are not the kind of things that GA will provide you. So GA is not going to tell you what your KPI is or what your ROI is. This is what you have to do, and this is something called measurement planning in the world of marketing and analytics. So what measurement planning is that this is exactly where the point where you define by yourself. Because if, let's say, Warda is running a blog about beauty, right? What is her key performance indicator in terms of marketing, right? Her key performance indicator would be, I want to get my average session duration higher, meaning I want people to actually come on my website and read the content, right? Spend more time reading what I've written about. The ROI of you running that website is, let's say, after putting out, 50 to 60 articles or sharing videos, if you introduce a product, right, and you want your community to buy that, your return on investment on the cost of that product is what you're calculating, right? So the number of people that bought your product. Now, there are millions of ways you interpret ROI and KPI. So ROI could mean so many other things for so many other businesses. So this is really a personal business stat more than it is something related to analytics, which it definitely is. But I hope I made sense over there, that it's something that you define. The software, whatever software you're using to track your business, it's not that software's job. It's your job to understand what is because it's you who say, for me, great performance for my company would mean I acquire an increase of, a 12% increase of returning visitors. So what that means is that a lot of the times, and this is something that startups face a lot, is that there's a surge of interest, right, in startups in today's world. What will happen is that they'll find you via an ad, and they will sign up, and they'll just forget about it, right? Because you're not you're not a startup that everyone is talking about, right? So you might never come back to that website. So a great metric of user engagement over time is returning users. That's very important as well. So I hope I answered your question. And what should the benchmark for these be? Again, the benchmark, you define what the benchmark is for KPI and ROI.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Oh, thank you.
All right, so another question. In programming, it's recommended to create projects that highlight your experience and impress employers. Can we do web analytics projects?
I'm sorry, can you please repeat that question?
So, Feline, if you want to kind of ask that question, just unmute yourself. That's okay. Maybe you can explain it a little better.
Again, I can't, I'm not sure, I can't find the question itself. Joanna, would you mind, okay, I found it, okay. In programming, it's recommended to create projects that highlight your expertise and impress employers. Can we do that? Absolutely, yes, you can. And the best way to do that is go and create, even before you go and create a demo account, I would highly recommend going in, use that link, and get yourself certified in the basic GA courses. So there's a course for beginners, there's a course for power users, and then there's an advanced course. And this, what I just explained, was a very high level explanation of web analytics, what web analytics is. But if this is something of your interest and you want to, let's say, show someone your understanding of it, the best way is to go and get certified, and then you will get a certification at the end of it, and you can use that in your resume or on your LinkedIn. Or the other best thing to do is log into the demo account and start creating reports. And this is one of the things that I started with, is with my understanding, and the demo account gives you a lot of information, right? So you understand, okay, it is an e-commerce store, there are different product categories, and these are the metrics. So you understand your dimensions, and then you understand your metrics, and then you understand, okay, what insight can I get, right? So for example, if you see something that is unusual, the website is getting an average of, let's say, 2,000 visitors a day, and then suddenly you see a drop in traffic, and that 2,000 comes 500. Well, there you go. That is you've got the thing to report on. So go ahead and try to look into some technical issues. Try to look into what could be causing this. Try to see if they were running some type of campaign and they stopped running the campaign, and so the traffic went down. So absolutely, there are many ways to impress your employer by doing this in advance. And also, I think other thing that I have to mention is that for reporting, there's a tool called Google Data Studio, which you can, so think of Data Studio as the ultimate reporting platform for all types of data, right? So let's say, for example, Feline is hired by a bank, right? And that bank is running, and Feline is reporting to the digital marketing manager, right? And what the digital marketing manager wants is that they want a quick view of everything they're doing in terms of paid media. So they're running ads on Snapchat, and they're running ads on Facebook, and they're running they're running Google ads, all of these things. The best place to aggregate all of that data would be a tool like Google Data Studio, and there's also a course for that, so you might want to check that out. And so you can do projects based on your understanding. You can connect data sources to Google Data Studio, and then you can customize what you want to share with your employer. And another trick that I can give you is that sometimes, well, not sometimes, you almost never have access to someone else's GA account unless you're working for that company. But let's say you want to get to know, you want to work for Qureos, let's say, and you want to get to know what's happening with their online platform. Another tool that you could use is called SimilarWeb. It's actually a Chrome extension, which you can add as an extension on your Chrome. And every time you go into Qureos.com, you can click on that extension, and it would give you an idea of what's happening. So maybe, I'm just throwing this out, maybe it tells me that Qureos is getting more traffic from the US than it's getting from the UAE, right? So maybe if you're applying for a job over there for website management or whatever, yes, it's SimilarWeb. What you can do is propose them a marketing campaign saying you should target people in the US, not in the UAE, because that's where most of your customer base is. So you can use tools on top of GA to understand basic data points about a business. You don't necessarily have to know you don't necessarily have to have the backend access to GA in order to get an insight of their basic metrics and dimensions. And it will tell you more than that. It will tell you their average visits. It will tell you, how many people are coming, where they're coming from. Is Qureos getting more organic traffic, or are they only getting traffic with paid? So there's a lot you can use to impress employers and increase your knowledge.
Great. Anyone else? Maybe we can do one more question. We're really out of time. So maybe one more. Anybody?
Oh, I hope they haven't slept from all this analytics talk.
Okay, so I guess that's it with the questions. So Minahil, thank you so much for being here today, for spending all this time with us, for the effort that you've taken to put this together for us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
I will be sharing the recording with all of you guys. You should have it sometime very soon. Also, we have a market research cohort starting next week. So if you want to be a part of it, go ahead and apply for the cohort on Talent Hub. And yep, I guess that's it from my side. Can you share the PowerPoint